Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Here are your current events for today, April 24th, 2020. In yesterday's daily White House pandemic briefing, Bill Bryan, the acting Undersecretary of Science and Technology for the Department of Homeland Security, said that according to new experiments, the COVID-19 virus does not do well under sunlight or heat. President Trump then asked Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx to, quote, speak to doctors to see if there's any way that you can apply light and heat to cure, unquote. President Trump also at the briefing suggested that ingesting disinfectant could possibly be used to treat people who have the virus. Medical officials are quick to point out that ingesting disinfectant, whether it be bleach, Lysol, or something else, is not the best of ideas, and warn people to not do that to treat the virus or to prevent them from getting the virus. Kentucky Senator and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell suggested that hard-hit states by the COVID-19 outbreak should be allowed to seek bankruptcy protection rather than be given a federal bailout. McConnell's office put out a document titled Stopping Blue State Bailouts, referring to many of the hardest hit states such as New York, California, and Michigan that also have Democratic governors. In my opinion, in this pandemic, we are not Democrats, we are not Republicans, there's not blue states, there are not red states. We are all in this together, and it is not wise to play politics and differentiate different peoples based upon their ideologies. Just my opinion. And some hopeful news on the pandemic front. England's University of Oxford researchers are testing a potential vaccine to the COVID-19 virus. Human trials of the vaccine began yesterday in Oxford, and one of the scientists involved in the development of the vaccine believes there is an 80% chance of success and that it could be, the vaccine, be available for wide use by the public as soon as September. This is hopeful news, but we have to remember that there is a scientific way to make sure that this vaccine or other vaccines do not do more harm than good. And so we need to not rush to judgment. We can be hopeful, but at the same time, let's make sure that it does what it intends to without potential damaging side effects. In an update to an earlier story this week on the Paycheck Protection Program, many of the large corporations who were first in line to get small business loans have now said they are returning the federal money. Shake Shack said they would return $10 million, and Ruth's Chris Steakhouse will return its $20 million small business loan. Yesterday, the House of Representatives approved more funding by a 388-5 margin, and now the bill awaits President Trump's signature. There is concern that even with this additional funding on a second round of PPP, that it will not last long and more rounds will be needed. Yesterday, a second Michigan protest took place over Governor Whitmer's lockdown of Michigan's economy, this time at her private residence. It is believed that Whitmer will extend the shelter-in-place order until May 15th, but will allow golf courses, landscape services, along with greenhouses, and the reopening of garden centers and big box stores. As the economy reopens, we must continue to be smart by wearing masks and practicing social distancing. We'll have more information today. The governor is scheduled to do a news conference in which she will lay out details on what she is going to allow and what she's not going to allow. What happened on this day of history, April 24th? In 1800, President John Adams approves legislation of around $5,000 to purchase necessary books that Congress may need, thus establishing the Library of Congress. Unfortunately, these books were destroyed in a fire that destroyed the Library of Congress as well in the War of 1812. What they did after that fire is they reestablished the library, and to replenish the books, they ended up buying President Thomas Jefferson's personal library. Unfortunately, most of those books were destroyed in a subsequent fire, but Congress has continued to fund and to operate, and after an initial restoration of books in the Library of Congress is still available today. In 1945, President Harry Truman is briefed on the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was an ultra-secret project to develop the atomic bomb. It began under President Franklin Roosevelt, and 12 days after his death, President Truman was briefed on the development of the atomic bombs. Now, Truman, as senator, had an idea that there was something going on when his committee investigating spending during the war asked questions about a factory in Minnesota that was being used to help develop the bomb, and he was quickly told by administrative officials to drop it, that he cannot talk about that publicly. Franklin Roosevelt did not trust Truman. According to some historians, was not fond of Truman, and that may have been a reason why he did not tell him about the development of the weapon. Other historians have said that it was so secret that not even the vice president knew about it. And so Truman was faced with a tough decision as to whether or not to actually use this new weapon subsequently in the war. The war in Europe ended in early May, and so the atomic weapons were used against Japan to end the war in the Pacific Theater. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter's attempt to rescue U.S. hostages held by Iran failed when 8 U.S. servicemen were killed when mishaps occurred at a staging area. Some of the helicopters failed to function due to sand, and some helicopters collided with a C-130 transport. The hostages were released 270 days later, literally minutes after President Ronald Reagan took the oath of office. The hostages were taken by Iranian revolutionaries after they overthrew the Shah of Iran and turned Iran into an Islamic republic under the leadership of the Ayatollah Khomeini. Since Jimmy Carter and the United States had supported the Shah, protesters took their anger out on that decision by charging our embassy and holding the embassy workers hostage for 444 total days. All the men were held for 444 days. The women and children were released a little bit later. But that was a huge embarrassment to the Carter administration, and many believe the main reason why Carter was only a one-term president. Well, that's our current events to end the week. I'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend, and remember to keep calm and keep on reading. We'll see you Monday.